What up, everyone? DJ Dubas here with you in the Military Radio Podcast with my partner in crime, Edgar Allan Poet. Another episode of Poetic Carnage where we talk sports talk and hot takes. Sir, how are you doing? Thank you for joining me yet again.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this one. This is my favorite time of the football season.
Yeah, we got a lot to get to today, and
Yes, we do. But are we starting with college first?
Yeah. I'm gonna have it's gonna be one of these things where like I'm gonna have to take my lumps, but then at the same time I'm gonna challenge you because I know how you feel about the national championship game. So for those that don't really know or haven't kept up, Texas Christian ended up playing Georgia in the national championship game. Turned out to be a fucking slaughter. Georgia just waxed the floor with TCU.
In their defense,
pretty much Poet kind of called this a few weeks ago, but there's some things about this that I'm going to defend. I know that you're kind of.
I'm going to give them.
What's that?
I'm going to give them a little bit of due because I had the infamous bit where I said, if I'm wrong, I'll apologize. And then, arguably, I wasn't wrong. So this is what I'm going to do. I am going to, because we're honest on this show, I'm going to admit where I think I was wrong, and then I'm going to talk about where I think I was right, and then I'll just quickly say why I do honestly think I was more right than wrong.
Okay.
But with that being said, I will say this on TCU's behalf. Not only was Georgia probably the more talented team, I mean, if you just look at like 5-star, 4-star, they're also a rough matchup for them. And sports oftentimes matchups matter, right? So I do want to give them that. However, most of the time I'm going to be making fun of them because I think they were overrated. So, but you do have some ammo to push back on and challenge. So
I do, and I'm saddened yet not surprised that they got I did not expect a 65-7 whooping. Like I expected them to get whooped, but that was beyond whooping.
A traditional 3-score beating.
Yeah, I thought okay, Georgia's gonna put up about 45 points and Texas might get around 20. But this was just abysmal. Like it was like, and I wonder a little bit about maybe Michigan approached TCU the wrong way because Michigan came into that game with one of the best defenses in college football.
Yes, they did.
And so I'm wondering, like you watch, and I know you probably agree, Georgia was just freaking physical with them. They just bullied them.
Yeah, in college football, and I watch a lot and listen a lot to Joel Klatt from Fox Sports because I disagree with him a lot, but I think he's fair. I think he knows the subject matter, and I think he's just got solid analysis, right? And so he was talking about what NIL does and things like that, and where it really hurts teams the most is you can no longer pull what is somewhat referred to as a classic Bama, where they're like, okay, you're a 5-star tackle, or whether nose tackle, guard, defensive line, whatever, on the line somewhere, offense or defense. You're going to sit for 2 years, and then in your third year, when you can't go pro, we're going to put you in. You're going to have had all those practice reps, some gameplay. Obviously, injuries happen, and then all of a sudden, we always have the best line. We always have the best defensive line. And college sports is so much more dependent on offensive and defensive line because the difference between a great offensive lineman or defensive lineman and just a good one is huge because it's so much more about talent and physical capabilities than it is coaching because you haven't had that type of coaching. So it was just, I think we expected Georgia's defensive line, which has 2 killers on it, to go ham. What people didn't expect, in my opinion at least, was how dominant Georgia's offensive line was going to be against TCU. Because Georgia ran the ball better. I mean, they were throwing constantly, especially the Bowser. But whenever they needed a 3rd and short, or if they were going to run it on like 2nd and long, they got what they needed more often than not. And it's sometimes college sports, it's the haves versus the have-nots, which is exactly why I said that was one of the best arguments that I had as to why TCU is overrated and why I think that the committee goes off of the best resume and not the best teams. Because so for instance, I'm still banging the Alabama drum. I'm not banging the Utah drum, although I thought that they had an interesting case to get in. I'm not gonna bang the USC drum because they needed to beat Utah to really be credible in that last game. I was beating the Tennessee drum and then Hooker got hurt, which sucks. But with Alabama, they had two losses, two at the last second against elite competition. Now you take that, and some of that's bad luck. Now they lost the game; they have to own it, and that is true. Accountability matters. But if you look at what TCU was, they won a bunch of games with some variance, with some luck. Now I will say this real quickly for the Michigan game. I know that overturning the touchdown on the deep pass was bad, but you know what would be a good thing to do after you get screwed on a call? Don't fumble the fucking ball. Like
that's true. All you gotta do is punch it in there.
Just punch it in. Don't fumble the ball. And it was so comical because not only do you fumble, not only is it at the 1 yard line, not only is it, I believe, the fullback who fumbled, which is inexcusable. Son, you should be happy you can get on the field at all. You fucking fumble the goddamn ball. But you fumble it. It's not like he meant to, but you fumbled it right to the TCU defender. There's no chance a Michigan player could get in. And that, ironically, Michigan did not take advantage of what Georgia did, which was they just have better players. And I blame a lot of that on Harbaugh, but I'll get to that in a second when I talk about coaching. Because to me, Bama was a 2-loss team that looked more like a 1-loss team. TCU was a 1-loss team who really played and felt more like a 3-loss team. And Bama didn't get the nod. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with that in terms of fairness, but when people were screaming it's the 4 best teams and saying that TCU was better than Bama, if TCU played Bama today, I know how 95% of the country's bet. And that 5%, out of that 5%, 3% are degenerates who are going to try to play, unless it's like a crazy spread. Like if you said Alabama by 35, okay, I'll bet TCU. And then the rest are going to be TCU fans.
Well, one of my arguments, when we talked a couple episodes ago was, when I looked at TCU's schedule, they had played, even though they played a lot of lower ranked teams, they played like 6 or 7 ranked teams throughout the year. And I thought that's pretty heavy handed. Like, I don't know how many Bama had. I can't remember, but
I think they had 5.
Okay. So they were pretty close. They were pretty close. Okay. Yeah. I was just, I often wonder how fair it is to a team like TCU. I mean, you're stuck playing like 6 and 7 ranked teams. So you're forced to step up your game a little bit in order to do that.
And that's and now I will also say this. Let's say they just have that one loss, right? And let's say some of those ranked wins weren't so close and didn't just feel so lucky, didn't feel so unsustainable. That would be a different argument. And the thing of it is that to be fair to, because I do want to try to be fair, TCU is not going to get the nod unless they play those tougher teams.
Right.
And now to be fair to Bama, if you look at strength of schedule wise, right, typically your non-ranked SEC opponent's way better than a non-ranked opponent from the Pac-12,
right,
or whatever. So it does go both ways. My issue with TCU, it was really honestly, I hate the underdog story. Like, to me, in life, we get it weird where in sports and feel good moments, we want the little guy to win. And then in real life, for whatever reason, we don't care about the little guy. That gets on a political rant. We won't go there. But the point of it is, I think we get it backward in sports. And so I didn't have an issue with someone saying, hey, I think TCU should be in. But when people were just jumping up and down, no, TCU is categorically better than Alabama and Tennessee and all this stuff, that's where I was like, okay, this hype is just getting too much at all. Because no one else had that. No one else spoke that way about USC, even LSU. And I mean, to be fair, you gave LSU their due. But they were who I thought they were, because they went in and they played Michigan, who thumped Ohio State, right? Who then played Georgia real tough. Okay. Michigan was horrible. They shot themselves in the foot constantly. They threw uncharacteristic interceptions. They changed how they played the game. I was like, I guess Harbaugh is just interviewing for jobs right now in the middle of the fucking game because his team's unprepared. Like it was just horrible. It was horrible. They looked so sloppy. Now they've had close games before, like when they played Illinois, and their offense is all running the ball, and Illinois had the best run defense.
Well, let me interject real quick.
Sure.
I think I agree with a lot of your points here. I think that if TCU had been forced to play Ohio State, the Buckeyes would have won that game. And the reason why I say that is, and maybe you'll agree, the two best quarterbacks in the playoffs were Stetson and Stroud. I believe those are the two best ones.
Yeah.
And, of course, they played a really close game. So,
yeah.
I do think that had TCU had to be forced to play Ohio State instead of Michigan, they probably would have lost to Ohio State. I think that would have happened.
Ohio State, and they epitomize something that's hard about college sports. You look at that roster, you know they're really good. They had a weak strength of schedule, and they lost to Michigan. They got in. They probably should have gotten in, but some years they wouldn't have. And against Michigan, it was close, and then they started shooting themselves in the foot, and then it just snowballed. So was that their mulligan game? Was that their, we can't have this game? We have to do better? Was it just a matchup? I mean, sports, random shit happens, at the same point in time. In MMA, they have this thing called MMA math, right? Where fighter A beat fighter B, but fighter C beat fighter B. So what happens if it's fighter A versus fighter C? And it never quite works out to that paper, rock, scissors thing that you want. With college sports, you almost have to look at it that way because they have fewer games and it's football. You can't have a best of three. People will die. Like your offensive lineman will just absolutely hate playing football by halfway through the second game. You can't play on a Saturday and a Sunday, right? So you're just kind of left with you have to fill in the gaps. And so for me, where TCU really came up short was they didn't match up well against dominant teams, physically dominant teams like Georgia. I don't think that they would have done well against Ohio State's speed. Now, if I wanted to be really mean to TCU, Ohio State they were beating the soul out of Georgia. When Marvin Harrison Jr. was healthy. He got that concussion. The whole game changed. Well, TCU has a dominant wide receiver. People are saying is going to be a first rounder, might be a top 10 pick. He didn't do anything. Now, Georgia obviously saw what happened and they schemed, but coaching matters. And I'm not saying the TCU's coach isn't any good, but Georgia, I mean, for all intents and purposes, Georgia's arguably been the second best team in college football for the past handful of years. They just couldn't get over Alabama. And before people crap on them for that, how many rings does Nick Saban have? You go out and outcoach him. It just is what it is. And you saw how quickly Dabo, Sweeney, and Clemson fell off once those two quarterbacks left. So with TCU, I think that they were probably the fifth or sixth best team. I don't think they were better than Alabama. And I also think, to your point about the quarterbacks, Stroud, his stock I know a lot of people liked him going into the playoffs as a prospect. If his stock didn't just rise, because he was amazing. The people blaming him for the loss to Georgia are insane.
Yeah, no, you know me. I've talked about it before. Ohio State, when it comes to their quarterbacks, I'm not a very big fan. There are a lot of the guys that come out of there, but this past year, Stroud has really impressed me a lot because he approaches it a little bit different. He can move and he can run, but he likes to pass first and look for his targets. And I think that's going to translate well to the NFL. So obviously, whoever drafts him, I think they're going to probably get a pretty good quarterback. Now, I'm going to lay out my whole argument for you, and you can pick it apart as you please.
Okay.
First and foremost, what works in your favor is what happened this year and last year. Mm-hmm. This year, obviously, TCU gets smacked around like a rag doll. Last year, it was Cincinnati. Yeah. And, that causes a problem for people like me who want to kind of see these other schools get in because, I try to go to bat for them. But if you're going to show up now, obviously, Michigan was a great win, but you're in a national championship game. You've got to bring more than 7 points. You can't do that. You can't just. I would have been okay if you put 28 and still got smacked around, but you got to do something. You can't look like that. But now to the other parts of my argument. You keep pounding the Bama drum, and that's fine because Bama's a very good team. Saban's one of probably the greatest coach in college football. But judging by Georgia's schedule and record this year, they destroyed just about everybody. I think the only teams they had 2 games where they were close: the Ohio State game in the playoffs, and then Kentucky. So outside of that, nobody even sniffed them. So I think Bama, even if Bama came in and played, they're probably going to still get beat by 3 scores at least.
Oh, absolutely. They absolutely. But
yeah,
my response would be, but if I get to 28 points, at least it's not over at halftime.
Right. And that's a fair point. The other thing I want to say is 2 other things. One, once the playoffs get expanded, I think it's going to solve a lot of this issue.
Yeah, it is.
Because then TCU and Cincinnati won't be getting as far as they did this time. You know what I'm saying? So if it expands to 8 and 16 teams, a lot of these guys that are shockers, they're going to drop off pretty early. So you're going to get a lot of
I will say this for your point as well. We can pick on TCU. I'm picking on TCU because it's not that I don't think they have an argument. I think their argument was overstated and kind of silly in terms of how far people took it. With Cincinnati, I was like, they're the 4th best team. Like they were. It didn't shake out this way. This is probably one of the weirdest playoff like scenarios that we had at all. Right. I mean, like I said it earlier, right? Like if USC handles their business, a lot of this is just taken care of, right?
Right.
We don't have to have this weird shit. But the other thing is that how many times have we seen Oklahoma or Notre Dame kind of get the nod in as the 3rd or 4th team, depending on how they look at it, and then just get smoked? Notre Dame has been absolutely destroyed. Oklahoma getting in and then getting killed used to drive Wave insane because he's like, look, they're just going to lose by 17 to 28 points.
Right.
They usually did. So I can understand TCU if next year they get in and it's somewhat similar. I'm just hoping that they have 1 or 2 bigger games against a ranked opponent where it didn't feel like they were just winning a coin flip. That's what I'm hoping for.
Now, and I think that luckily for the TCUs and Cincinnati, once they go to expand the playoffs, they're very fortunate because if they hadn't decided to expand any playoffs at some point, they probably would have reevaluated how they're going to put these teams in, because it goes back to your point. You can't keep allowing a team like TCU or Cincinnati to get in the playoffs if they aren't going to show up. It doesn't matter if they upset the Michigans or whatever. You got to show up for the big game. If you're gonna go out there and say, "Hey, our record and what we've done makes us deservedly so to get into this game," you got to show up.
Absolutely. And
the counter argument that I have for this.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, brother.
That's all right. And it goes to I'm kind of unfairly going to the NFL with this, but early in my young career as a Bronco fan, Elway went to 3 Super Bowls and routinely got their asses kicked.
Yeah.
So your opinion is, would be, what is your opinion? Is like, so take the Broncos against the Niners. We get smoked like 55-10. Does that mean that the Denver was not worthy enough to be there? Okay.
No, because, and here's the thing, I think that's a fair point. One, to my younger fans, I'm 35, so I caught the tail end of John Elway really watching football in the 90s, watching with my dad. That Cincinnati, family was Bengals fans. My dad liked a couple players on the Broncos. He liked Elway, he liked Atwater. He wasn't a huge Terrell Davis fan, but he liked the story, right? Like he liked him, but he wasn't as avid as he was about those 2. John Elway had the kind of bad luck. He had good luck and bad luck. He played in the AFC. The AFC was absolute dog water. So his good defense and marginal offensive players didn't stop him or other great quarterbacks at that time from making the Super Bowl. The problem is that the NFC Championship game was the de facto Super Bowl. For whatever reason, the NFC was just so much more dominant. Now, there have been theories about that. But John Elway,
lack of free agency.
You just happen, if you look at like, oh wow, Jimmy Johnson and Bill Walsh and some of the best coaches of their era went there. And it could have shaken out the other way as well. What I would say is to take your argument and to be fair with it, TCU shouldn't feel like they didn't deserve to get into the Final Four. They just shouldn't feel like that they were absolutely entitled to be there, like it was a slam dunk.
Right.
It also doesn't look great that their big win against Kansas State and they ended up losing to them. Well, they played Bama, and Alabama beat the soul out of them. Now, I will say, I will argue against myself a little bit. I call it the Nick Saban effect. Until you play against Nick Saban and you feel the pressure of how good of a coach he is, it's different. TCU felt that against Kirby because their own coach, TCU's own coach, and I forget his name, he's a good coach. He was like, "We're just making mistakes we haven't made all year." Well, yeah, you are. You're in the national championship game. The other team is better than you. Half of them have a ring. Stetson Bennett is playing to get drafted. They have their backup defensive tackle is arguably better than any player you have other than your wide receiver, and they're rotating him in, and your guards and center can't do anything about it other than hold and try to keep it. So it just sucks. What I want, and I like to meme, and I like to go over the top and all that stuff. What I want from the people who are banging on the TCU bandwagon, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just remember that when you start ranking teams, consider coaching, consider the fact that pedigree matters, experience matters, and just do yourself a favor and remember that at the end of the day, a resume in college football means so very little because, like, quite frankly, like if you look at what Ohio State looked like versus Michigan and what they looked like versus Georgia, that was a team who didn't have many strong wins. That was a team who kind of got in a little bit based off of pedigree. And look how close they came. And I don't know if Ohio State would have beaten TCU. I know how I bet it. I know how you probably bet it, especially if Marvin Harrison Jr. is healthy. That guy's good.
Yeah, I thought it was really a perfect scenario for TCU because I know that Michigan beat Ohio State, but if you were to replay that game 9 times out of 10, I think Ohio State comes on top. And so I thought the matchup wise that if TCU was going to get by anybody, it was going to be Michigan.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the quarterback position. They took advantage of a quarterback who is decent, but he's not as good as like Stetson or Stroud. And so
because
but I'm going to give you all the love in the world because I know truly how Poet feels, and this is exactly what he's saying to me the night of the national championship game.
Yeah.
I haven't got time for this Mickey Mouse bullshit.
I was talking some shit.
I ain't got time for this Mickey Mouse bullshit.
I will say this for TCU as well, to be fair, because I've tried to be a good winner, because I'm clearly right. Is this. It's now going to be a lot easier for that school to recruit. They've always been a good football school. I want them. I actually like TCU. I used to root for them a little bit because I liked, and I still do to a certain extent. Andy Dalton was also with Damian Tomlinson also played there. Seems like once every 10 years they just get a super dominant player. But if I were to redo, knowing what we know now, I think it would have been Georgia, who was probably going to beat anybody. Although I think maybe if they played Ohio State 10 times, I think they'd win 6. So it'd be pretty close. I put Michigan at 4, and I'd probably scream at Harbaugh to not fucking take a goddamn interview in the middle of the game. Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Bama. Or if I wanted to be spicy, I'd just say fuck it. Maybe Utah could beat all of them. Fuck
well, Bama, they finished 6th, right? That was where who was 5th? Was it USC?
Final college football rankings. Georgia, TCU, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama is what's coming up on Google.
Oh, so they were 5th. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it would have been the real tragedy. I think is what would Tennessee have done if Hooker doesn't get hurt?
Oh yeah, well that's the real conundrum there because
Tennessee, I wouldn't want to play them. I would pick Georgia to beat them, but I wouldn't. But if Georgia went in there thinking, "Oh, we're just going to beat them easily," they might get upset. And I'll just say this in closing about TCU. Learn to cover a fucking tight end. Like, I don't know, like double him. Like, I don't know what they were doing. They didn't do anything. It's like you have this guy, his last name is Bowser's, and he's big and he's fast and he's strong. And you're putting these little fucking chihuahuas on him. Double him.
Yeah,
Double.
one thing I noticed, and I don't know if you did, you talked about the coaching. Like the coach for TCU to me, I kind of felt like he thought he can come into this game doing what he did with Michigan. Like I don't think he understood that you have to change your game plan a little bit depending on who you're playing. And you're not going to be like I saw him do a lot of screens early in the game. I'm like, you're not going to get away with that. There's too much speed over there.
Yeah, SEC speed. Like I know college football fans are tired of hearing about the SEC, and they have the best athletes and they're the best coach. A lot of that is overstated, but a lot of it's also true. And I just got to be honest with you. How many teams do you think Georgia's seen where they're like, oh, we can't block them, so we'll just do dink and dunk passes and screens to offset it. They've seen it. They've seen it.
Yeah, from better players, no less.
Yeah, they do. I don't think that TCU played a team that was as good at open field tackling as Georgia was all year.
Nah, Georgia was a dominant team. I picked them to win the whole thing anyway, but
yeah. And once Stetson Bennett started playing well, it just felt impossible.
I mean, if I was TCU as coach, sure, I'd be nervous playing Georgia, but I'd be like, I got to do something different. I got to do something they're not expecting me to do.
Yeah.
Because actually TCU had some success running the ball, but they didn't really do a lot of that. They tried to do these quick screens, and Duggan's trying to do his. He did get one nice open shot, but you're not going to get that every time.
No.
All right, well, let's shift gears. We're going to go to the NFL. And the first thing we do have to address a little bit, and it ties in with another little thing that I just found out recently, but that's the injury to Damar Hamlin from the Bills. He is doing better, which is great. So we're very happy for him in that regard. But I found out that Sunday, your team, a couple of jerk-offs, were doing a mock sack for a mock CPR after a sack. It was Highsmith and Leo, is that his name?
Oh, the defensive lineman.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that, since that's your team?
What did we? So I didn't hear about this. What did we?
So basically, I guess one of the guys, either Highsmith or Leo, made a sack on the player they were playing, the quarterback. I forget who team you were playing, but
Watson. Was it Watson when you played?
Yeah, probably. And the other defender was on the ground, so I think it was Highsmith or somebody kind of started doing the pressure on the chest while he's on the ground.
Don't like it. I don't like it.
Nope. Yeah, and I thought, like, you got to be using more common sense. I know Highsmith came out and said, I shouldn't have done that. I didn't mean it in a negative way. But I'm like, how are you not recognizing that something just happened like a week before with that? It's like, you got to just be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, you do. You do. Look, when the cameras are on you professionally, you have to own what you do. Oh, it's hard. It is hard. I fucking care. So I don't think that they were making fun. I hope they weren't making fun of that guy. And if they were, then they're going to have to get right with the Lord. They're going to have to go to church. They're going to have to fucking figure something out, because that'd be pathetic.
Yeah, so I don't think they were trying to do anything, but it's like you're not being aware. You don't understand.
No. And it's especially bad because of the rivalry between Cincinnati and Pittsburgh has gotten nasty. People have thrown bottles at players. There have been fist fights. Joey Porter, the Steelers, got fired, but he got on the field and was arguably picking a fight. Like, there's a lot of violence and bad history. Vontaze Burfict, Antonio Brown, enough said, right? So not only do you not want to stoke those flames, but a dude almost died on the field. Yeah. So especially, and since we know that players plan out their celebrations because they have to make sure they're not breaking the NFL's stupid rules and getting a 15-yard flag and whatnot, that falls under the "what are you doing, dummy?" Yeah, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and think that they weren't taking a pot shot, and we're just going to file that under the "don't be a dumbass." And we probably won't remember this come next, this time next year. But yeah, no, that's a bad look. That's a bad look.
Don't right. Like it. Don't like All it. Right. Well, let's talk about 3 games. only two of them really meant anything. But first one is, of course, the Steelers narrowly missing the playoffs. You were playing Cleveland. You had beaten the Browns. You needed, I think, the Seahawks. Who was it? No, it wasn't Seahawks. It was, you needed the Dolphins to lose and the Patriots to lose.
Yeah.
Patriots lost to the Bills, but the Dolphins were able to pull out a game against the Jets, I think.
Yep.
And so, any feelings on that? Do you think, are you okay with them not making the playoffs right now? How do you feel?
Well, you know what? If we wanted to make the playoffs, we shouldn't have choked away that game against New England, where we physically dominated them for 95% of the game, and 5% that we didn't. That's where we lost. We lost to Zach fucking Wilson. So we gave up a game-winning drive to Zach fucking Wilson. So if we wanted those 10 wins, we should have won one more game. That with that being said, it's a hard fucking week. We also won some games that arguably we shouldn't. We're not going to talk about though. The glorious Steeler Nation. And point is that we went 9-8. It was a bad season if you believe in tanking. It was a good season if you believe in fighting and trying to maintain a culture. It was an okay season if you believe it's a case by case scenario. In there, this is what I know. I know that we beat the fuck out the Browns, and if we didn't fumble at the 1 yard line and pull the goddamn Michigan, we would have very easily won that game. And ultimately, it doesn't truly matter because all we were playing for and all the Dolphins were playing for were really the right to get their ass kicked by Buffalo.
Right.
And I will say this: if Tua was playing, that game's a lot more interesting. He's not, so I don't know. Buffalo by 28. Like I don't. It's going to be potentially a really fun game. My buddy, he picked up football this year, and he settled on the Bills because he loves Josh Allen. Reminds him of John Elway. And I was like, you're going to really enjoy this week. Next week is when it gets interesting.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it sucked. I wanted to make the playoffs. I wanted Pickett to get that experience. But,
Well, I will say this, because we're going to get to our Coach of the Year later on, but Tomlin, I was kind of surprised when I saw his stats that he's had 16 seasons without losing season. I think that's pretty fucking amazing.
First ballot Hall of Famer. If you think Tomlin can't coach and you're a Steelers fan, fuck off.
And then you just look at what he did this year. You missed the playoffs, but you had a rookie quarterback. Plus, you had to play musical chairs with the quarterback.
And the AFC North, which is not an easy division.
Right. So the other game, one game I want to talk about is, of course, Denver, my team. They played the Chargers. It was interesting the last couple of games of the year. We know we fired Nathaniel Hackett, our head coach. We had a guy, Roseberg, in the interim, taking care of stuff. I really like this guy's approach. The offense played 10 times better than they've played all year, especially in this game against the Chargers, who's already going to the playoffs. And they played their starters. This is what was interesting. I thought they would sit the guys. So they came in wanting to win and play, and so we came out with the win. And Judy had the game of his life, which is great. It was good to see that.
You have to keep them, by the way.
What's that?
You have to keep them. Anyone if the whole is Jerry Judy good conversation is dead. I'm not interested in it. Anyone who thinks otherwise.
Yeah, and that's the thing now is that it doesn't matter how I feel about Russell. Seeing what happened the last couple of weeks of the season, it looks like that, at least on the surface now, is that Hackett was the bigger problem. So at this stage, if coaching can fix the offense, then that's what we need to do. We need to get a good coach. But we'll be talking about that later too, about some of the options Denver has in that regard. As far as the final game, this is an interesting one because going into the evening game, all the Packers had to do was beat the Lions, and they were in. All they had to do. And they didn't. Somehow the Lions came out on top, and I found this kind of funny. Just made me laugh a little bit, but
yeah.
So for two guys that were highly touted coming into this season, both Rodgers and Russell are sitting at home. But that was kind of surprising because that was in Green Bay, and usually Rodgers shows up. I mean, they did. It was a tough game, but kudos to the Lions, man. They got it done.
They went deep into the bag of tricks. They did not,
and they knew ahead of time they weren't going. That was the thing.
Yeah.
Like, when I saw Seattle won, I was like, okay, that means the Lions are out. And Seattle's like, please, guys, just win this game for us. I don't know if they were doing it for Seattle. I doubt it, but
well, no, they were doing it because Aaron Rodgers talks a lot of shit. He's a habitual line stepper, to paraphrase the Chappelle Show.
yeah.
He is hated by every fan base in the NFC North. He's hated by a lot of people, a lot more people the past couple of years than before. And he's kind of a smug guy in a lot of people's eyes. And, let's just be honest. The Lions don't have any love for him. They're trying to build something. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They have all kinds of weapons on offense. Jared Goff is resurrecting his career. And I'm happy for him. Jared Goff's a real good guy, and he got memed a little too hard towards the tail end of his time in LA and early on.
Well, he's got to be kind of enjoying it a little bit. He's like, yeah, I know Matt got a Super Bowl, but they were way better than the Rams this year.
Yeah, way better, and he's not taking the beating that Matt took.
Yeah,
and it's just and that's a game that the Packers should have won. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers is washed. When I see him play, I still see a very good quarterback.
Do you think the Packers fan base is maybe a little bit fed up with him at this point?
They're a hard bunch. So I used to live in Illinois, and there's a ton of Packers there, Packers fans there, and a lot of them are going to be fed up with him when he demanded a trade. A lot of them still resent Brett Favre for that same thing. A lot of them are going to love their quarterback no matter what, just with that blind fan love with their arms around him. A lot of them are going to be somewhere in the middle. I think if I was a Packers fan, I would look at Rodgers and go, you're no longer a 10 out of 10. You're an 8 out of 10 with some nice intangibles, especially when you're not podcasting, you asshole. Maybe knock that off. Leave it to the professionals.
Right.
But he's no longer, I think, physically what he was. And I don't think he's a top 5 guy anymore. I still have him firmly in my top 10 quarterbacks right now. And if he comes back, they're resigned to the fact they know they're not a Super Bowl contender. And if he comes back, they're resigned to the fact that they're just kind of in limbo, waiting to reboot. They're still trying to see what they have with Jordan Love. That's why his "I'm going to play even though I'm hurt" interview on that podcast with Pat McAfee was so frustrating to a lot of people. And then he walked it back. He's a very political guy. If I was a Packers fan, I would ultimately be like, please leave. Just retire or work out a trade and let us move on. Because
I think
can't win a Super Bowl anymore.
I think if I was the Packers right now, it's like, okay, we appreciate everything Aaron did for us, but it's like, we could probably get still some good compensation for him at this point. Now would be the time to move him and try to rebuild. If you think Jordan's a guy, great, go with him. But if not, you can go into the draft midway. I think they'll be around towards the bottom, but they'll still have a chance. There's like 4 or 5 decent quarterbacks coming in here, and you can take you can say, okay, well, got Jordan. Let's say Bennett shows up,
play him,
draft, get him.
And
see what happens.
Right, if Jordan Love, if you, and that's why people wanted to see more of Jordan Love at the end of the season, and then they became playoff viable again, and it's like, okay, now you have to play Rodgers. But I mean, to me, I think the obvious thing is play Jordan Love for a year. If he sucks, maybe you can get Caleb Williams, right? Because that's the prize everybody's looking at. He looks like baby Mahomes. If he's good, then you solve the problem. If he's somewhere in the middle, then you just have to look at the facts, make a decision, and then carry on. But that's still more enticing than paying Aaron Rodgers $60 million or whatever it is. And here's the thing. If he comes back early on and says, "Hey, I'm coming back," I signed that extension. They knew that the way that extension functions is basically 3 separate 1-year deals. Now, at the end of it, and this is where it gets dicey, because I remember when he signed it, they were talking about on ESPN, the NFL Network, that on that last year, that's when they enter cap hell. In the NFL, you can kick the can down the road a lot. The Rams are my NFC team. We've done that a lot. But no, eventually the bill comes due. And so it might be enticing, arguably, for them to bring it back for 2 years. Then on that last year, they suck. They go through cap hell. They'll still have enough money to sign the rookies and just reboot it. So you can take that argument and say, well, let's just get there quicker and be done with it. Or, hey, let's keep trying with Aaron Rodgers because making the postseason is fun. It's not fun being like a laughing stock like the Browns, who spent a bunch of money on a guy who might actually be washed, and he's not even 30. So,
right.
No one feels bad for him either. But I digress.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about the most valuable player, defensive player of the year, comeback player of the year, and coach of the year. So we're going to start with MVP.
Okay.
Who you got?
So the Patrick Mahomes argument makes itself. Getting a touchdown, high completion percentage is like 66, 67, 68. Broke the passing record. Did it while losing Tyreek Hill. Still has Kelsey. He has viable NFL receivers, but none of them are great. Good line, not great. Good deep. It's basically the Mahomes reach. That's probably the default argument. And that would be, if I was a voter, that's probably how I would vote. However, that's boring. So I am going to make two arguments quickly for two other guys who I think have strong cases, maybe just not as strong. First one is Joe fucking Burrow. Fucking hate him. He's the best deep ball passer in the league. He's doing it on a bad line. They got better slowly throughout the year. Then they lost their right tackle. You could overall maybe call them a slightly above average line, but he's doing it in what ended up being a tougher division than the AFC West, although I never saw that coming. He's doing it with a bad line. Yes, he's doing it with a lot of great weapons, but he's still really good without Jamar Chase. You also have to give him his due. He makes T. Higgins and he makes Boyd better. And quite frankly, the Bengals had a shot at the number 1 seed. And if they played the Bills or the Chiefs, a lot of people would be betting the Bengals. So Joe Burrow has a viable argument throughout week 1 where he basically was coming in with almost no practice time because he had an appendectomy. That's the first argument. Second argument, I think is probably an argument that is slowly gaining traction. We'll see it be truly viable one day. Justin Jefferson. I don't care that he wasn't great at the end of the year, and I don't care that he's a wide receiver. I care about are you the best player on your team, and are you the reason why they win? So if you look at that offense, Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. Don't at me. He's a good quarterback. Not doing this shit anymore. My facts, goddamn matter. But he's not a great quarterback. That offensive line is horrible. There is no ranking that has them high, whether you're doing advanced analytics, whether you're doing eye tests, whether you're doing pundits. Everyone pretty much agrees that line is ass. Cook is a good running back. I don't know if he's ever gotten back to what he was. And you have Justin Jefferson, who's getting doubled. He's beating double coverage. He's making spectacular catches, clutch catches. He's running everything on the route tree. He is the driving force of that entire football team. And he carries the load for that team to a greater degree than some quarterbacks carry the load for their team. Because he's a wide receiver, I think we shouldn't punish him for that. I think we should reward him for that. Because, quite frankly, that means his job is harder. Because he's dependent upon that shit line and a good but not great quarterback. Now, with all that being said, it would have been nice for Justin Jefferson to beat the fuck out the Packers, submit that shit, lock up their high seed early, break the record, go out with a bang, and really, punctuate that strongly. With Joe Burrow, I think that he's not going to get the nod because the gap between him statistically and Mahomes is so wide. In the MVP race, it's now a quarterback race. Running backs are pretty much disqualified from it now. And it's also a stat race. If you go back to last year, man, it was Rodgers versus Brady, and then it just came down to which line of statistical thinking did you like better? Did you like the efficiency stats, or did you like the raw numerical stats? And it went to Rodgers. So it's going to go to Mahomes. I'm not taking anything away from Mahomes. He's the best player. He's the best quarterback. He had an amazing season. He deserves it. But that's kind of my look at it.
Yeah, I think initially I was thinking Jalen Hurts. The team seemed a lot different without him in there. Um, but as I was reading along, like some of the arguments for the team said that there's a lot of talent on that team as compared to KC.
Mhm.
And so I think in the end, I probably would go with Mahomes. I think that, despite all the issues that Kansas City faces, it's easy to kind of like not acknowledge Mahomes because they're so good. But then when you look at it more deeply, you could just see that that kid still like really carries that offense. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
so it's really hard for me to argue against Mahomes probably winning most valuable player this year.
I think he deserved it. Hurts didn't get injured, and he was on pace for 400 yards, and he was on pace for even more rushing yards, and he was just a dynamic player. Just watch him, you're like, yeah, that sucks to defend. It would have been interesting because he does have better receivers than Mahomes does, for instance, but he has the better line. He definitely not probably definitely has a better running back. And he has a good coach, but not as good as Andy Reid is arguably top 5 coach ever. So,
Hmm.
it would have been interesting. The other thing with Hurts is that, and this helps some people don't want to admit it, but it's what you said. It's easy to take Mahomes for granted, and we like a nice shiny new toy. Mahomes used to be that shiny new toy. Now we're like, yeah, he's the best quarterback. Whatever. What the fuck ever.
All right, defensive player of the year, and I'll start with this one. It's pretty interesting here too, and I'm kind of switching it like you did on the first one. Like I think Nick Bosa will probably win it. The guy is strong. He's playing well for the Niners. Probably having his best year ever with them.
Yeah.
But I kind of look at that too. I was like, okay, Nick's there, but that is a stacked freaking defense. A very strong team overall. So then I had to look at myself, say, well, who made an impact that was not on such a great team, but it was enough to kind of help that team get some wins. And I had to come down to Sauce Gardner, man, like the rookie. Like,
Yeah, he's on my list. Yeah.
yeah, I felt like the Jets didn't get to the playoffs. They weren't like the greatest team, but they had some surprising wins. And Sauce played excellent throughout the year.
Yes,
He
he did.
really played well.
You have to be good, and that's your nickname. Otherwise, you're going to get memed to death.
Yeah.
I think it's going to go to Nick Bosa. Sacks matter. His coach was campaigning for him. They're winning a bunch of games, mostly with defense. Yada yada yada. It's set up for him nicely. Um, I think it should go to Chris Jones. I think that he was the best defensive player in football this year. I think that Kansas City defense is horrible without him. With that being said, Bosa has 18 and a half sacks. He's a monster against the run. He doesn't take plays off. He's the best defensive player on probably the best defense. The defense is carrying that team. We can get into Brock Purdy later, but like that's really more like Brock Shanahan, to be honest. The issue with that Sauce has is that he's a cornerback, and just blanketing a guy, it helps him because he's in New York, where if you're good at all, he'll get a lot of attention. But unless you're doing pick sixes and all that shit, which a lot of good corners only get to do a couple times in their career, like a lot of interceptions because they just don't get thrown at. It is what it is. So Bosa is a good, solid pick, but kind of unexciting, especially when you see like the difference between him and his Defensive Player of the Year award and how good Donald was. And his, it's not close. You compare TJ Watt to Bosa, 23 sacks, carrying a defense, versus Bosa's 18 and a half. Like, it does feel like out of the past 5 years, he will be the worst player with the worst single season resume to win. So it's just not very exciting. I was hoping Parsons was going to keep him up.
Yeah, I saw him listed in the list, but I think between him and Bosa, it's just been kind of night and day. But I love Parsons.
Oh yeah. And 4 games on a sack is what did him in. He's still great in coverage, still a monster against the run, but you need some production. Stats matter.
Yeah. Who's your comeback player of the year?
A lot of people are saying Christian McCaffrey, and I kind of see that. I had a list, and then I forgot to save it like a fucking dumbass. So that's good. I think McCaffrey is probably the safe one. Ultimately, Derrick Henry got some consideration coming back from that injury, but it's probably McCaffrey. You know what I mean? It's probably him.
Yeah, I think mine is probably the most unlikely, but mainly because I used to bust on him a lot, and it has to be Geno Smith. I've never seen a guy who wasn't expected to do much, hasn't done much the last 7 years, and comes out and has one of his best years ever as a pro.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's just a factor of Carroll and the Seattle team, who knows? But sometimes all you need is that chemistry and that type of offense or whatever to do your thing.
I mean, he should get the benefit of the doubt. I mean, he was drafted by the Jets. That's a horrible place to go if you're a quarterback.
Right.
Like, so he's got to get some love by karma.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's either going to be like a guy that's going to capitalize on this year, or he's going to be another Derek Anderson and have like a 1-year wonder. It's going to be one of those things.
Ooh, I would love to see him be
above average and
be the well, then he was a first round pick, so I mean, that's kind of.
I think he thought of the second.
Was he?
Because when he got drafted, there was some really unfair press coverage about him, and he didn't interview well, and he was kind of arrogant and cocky. But some of the press coverage about that was overstated and really shitty, and I would argue racially tinged. And so I've always been a bit of a Geno Smith guy, which I know sounds absurd, but I've always taken up for him because I'd rather my backup, shout out to Jaded, I'd rather my backup have talent than not have talent. And so, fuck Mark Rippon or whatever the fuck his name is. Give me a Geno Smith any day. I'd love to see him be. He had first round talent. I'd love to see him be this generation's Trent Green or Rich Gannon. A guy who had the physical tools. Took a while, some bad circumstances and stuff like that. And to be quite honest, I think that he's probably found a home in Seattle. I don't think they can get rid of him.
No, and I think the fans really like him. They call his name all the time. Like they really support him, and that's important. So
yeah.
All right, Coach of the Year.
This is a tough one.
I have 4 nominations. I did pick one. I will have 2 runner-ups. I felt like Tomlin and the coach for the Lions are the runner-ups. I didn't keep them in there because they didn't make the playoffs, but they had great years, and I thought that was like a masterful job by both of those coaches to at least be competitive and be in the thick of things at the end of it. So kudos to those guys. Now, before I give you who I select, I would give you my 4 nominations. First one being Doug Peterson of the Jaguars.
I had him on my final list.
Mike McDaniel for the Dolphins. Nick Sirianni for the Eagles. And Brian Daboll for the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
So those 4 are all on my list. I would have had Tomlin on my list if we made the postseason. In my top 5, I had all 5 of them. I also had Shanahan because he had the fucking coach with a bajillion different quarterbacks, and that's rough.
Yeah.
Who'd you go with?
In the end, I felt that Nick Sirianni was probably the best pick because I just didn't see the Eagles doing what they did this year at all. I knew that the Eagles were a decent team. I knew that Jalen was a decent enough quarterback. I just did not expect this year. Like, they are on fire. They may have lost a couple of games here and there just out of the blue, but overall, I think that the way that they've handled Jalen is exceptional. You and I talked way back. I was concerned that Jalen may not sustain what he's doing, but he has. And I have seen a couple times where Jalen falls back on bad habits, but for the most part, 98% of it, he's still playing and improving the way a quarterback should. So
yeah.
If I end up ever being wrong on Hurts, I will own it. And I'm actually very happy for him. I think that people didn't really believe in him in the last couple of years. Like they thought that they would just be replacing him eventually, but he's come out this year and he's proven to the Eagles fans and to the NFL that he's for real.
Oh yeah, and he they what the Eagles did and what he has Sirianni has to get a lot of credit for. They looked at him and they said, physically you're pretty impressive. We have some things to work on, and we're going to put the effort in, and we're going to support you, and we're going to fleece the Titans because they have a horrible GM who doesn't know what a fucking wide receivers are worth in 2022. Glad you got fired, dumbass. But besides that, it's hilarious that he got fired after the beating the Eagles gave him. They put him in a position to succeed, and they were patient. Mine came down to Sirianni, Duvall or Dable, and Shanahan. Sirianni, he laid out the case for him perfectly. Also, pretty good clock management. Good, didn't have any Hackett.
Not Hackett.
Not Hackett. not fucking Hackett. Or Robert Salah, who was in the mix too until the Jets bottomed out. Peterson, Lawrence is going to be a stud, and he helped get him back right on track after the horrible Urban Meyer thing. You have Duvall, who just good coach, got a lot of production out of Daniel Jones, got the Giants into the postseason. Pardon me, just a good job. I have to give it to Shanahan. He's the second. If McVay is gone, and I think he is, Shanahan will be the second best play caller behind Andy Reid. He came into the season with Trey Lance, who just feels cursed at this point. Trey Lance got hurt. Garoppolo got hurt. Now he's on there with Brock Purdy. I understand that it's a QB-friendly system, Shanahan system. He's calling the plays. I understand that it's a great offensive line.
Yeah, and just really quickly, whenever someone says it's a QB-friendly system, like I understand that, but we're talking about a rookie. And,
a seventh rounder, too.
Right, and Kyle's not, at least yet, he's not like Bill Belichick. So the fact that Kyle's able to get Brock to play at that level still is great. And then I thought, it wasn't so much Kyle himself, but the Niners were masterful in how they got McCaffrey. Like, that was the biggest deal of the year. Yeah. And and I'm sure Chris is happy as a clam. Like, going to the Niners where you're going to be able to compete for championships is a great deal. Oh, and when he got in there, he made an immediate impact. It wasn't like he was taking baby steps. He was making big plays.
With Kyle Shanahan, the best way I can make his case is that there are people who believe that I do, like most people do, that it's a quarterback league, and they have a seventh rounder, and you're like, they might fuck around and make a Super Bowl, And I also with Coach of the Year, if you go back and look at a lot of winners, a lot of those coaches don't pan out. They're actually not very good, and they actually win because of a story, kind of like a nice narrative. And so it's actually hilarious when you go back and look at past Coach of the Year award winners. So I do personally try to lean towards giving it to a coach who has some bona fides. You know what I mean? And I'm also a Shanahan homer. I loved his dad, and I really like him as a coach. So I have some bias. If I wasn't going to give it to him, I'd probably give it to Sirianni. Because there's also something to be said for, too, the NFC East is a good division. It's weirdly good, but it's a good division. The worst team is the Commanders. They're not that bad of a team.
Well, yeah. I mean, you look at the Cowboys. We knew they would be pretty good.
Yeah.
But no one expected the Giants or the Redskins to be competitive as they were. No one saw
You will call them the Commanders. You will call them.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking about that. I forgot. I keep doing that. Yeah. I'm always so used to calling them the other name, like the Commanders. Cobra Commanders.
Commanders. Yeah. What a horrible fucking
No, you make a great argument because really, as good as Sirianni has done with the Eagles, they haven't had to face as much adversity as the Niners have at all because all the injuries they've been dealing with at the quarterback position. So, and isn't Samuel out? Debo, he's out, right?
He's supposed to be back for the playoffs.
But he's been out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
He's missed games.
yeah. So that's another weapon you don't have at your disposal. So.
But when he gets back, when you have him, Ayuk, McCaffrey, Kittle, if you can have 3 of those 4 healthy, just 3,
You're tough. If you have all 4 healthy.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into our NFL predictions for this coming week, I did want to take a little time to talk about the Denver Broncos search for a coach. And we talked a little bit about Harbaugh might be one of the candidates that's going to come to Denver. I know that Denver's talked to, or at least going to be trying to talk to Peyton at one point, Quinn, and Caldwell. There's some other names in the list too. Someone mentioned Shaw or somebody, maybe, possibly. I don't know. But I don't know where I am exactly and who I want. I know some like they're going to interview Evero for sure. But I'm, as much as I love Evero and what he's done with the defense this year, I'm just very cautious about having another young guy take over the lead role. Like I think with Russell and the window that we have to try to win a championship, it's got to be a coach that has experience getting to the Super Bowl. And I think that Harbaugh and Peyton are probably the 2 leading candidates to do that. I suppose I would like Harbaugh because he's more of like a no-nonsense kind of guy. And that's kind of
with warts. He
does. But this team is soft, man. The Broncos are soft. And they just really need a kick in the ass. They need to be able to have someone that's going to keep them focused. I thought, as much as I don't like Colin Kaepernick, I think Harbaugh did a great job of utilizing him to his best points and got the most out of that quarterback. So
did Roman, but they hate him in Baltimore because they don't understand fucking football.
Right. So for me right now, I guess it's Harbaugh. I mean, do you have any thoughts on who you think would be the best fit in Denver?
So Harbaugh would be my pick under 2 presuppositions. The first of which is that you're okay with him not being there longer than 3 or 4 years. If you look at what happened to him in San Francisco, he started losing the locker room, okay? And there are a lot of reports of that, okay? Now, Justin Smith and Patrick Willis and a couple guys stood up for him and said, oh, we don't really agree with that. He's our coach. I'm not saying he completely lost the locker room, but he is an old school college coach. He'll get in your face, he'll scream at you, and he's screaming in the face of millionaires, people who make more money than him, people who will retire with more money than him. His recipe does not work long in the NFL. And the fact that he had a big power struggle with the San Francisco Niners owner to an extent, really more so the GM. And guess what? Harbaugh's proven right because when he left, they were bad for a while. If that's acceptable, if the idea is he gets 1 year with Russ, and if it's not with Russ, then we're going to give him a young quarterback to Green, and then maybe there's 3 or maybe 4 years after that, then that's completely fine. If you're trying to build something long term, if you're trying to find the next Belichick or Reed or whatever, then that doesn't work. Because it's just hard to believe with his personality type that he can be any place longer than 5 years. In Michigan, it works because he's screaming at college kids, and I know until recently they're always losing to Ohio State, and he was losing to Ohio State, but he helped them maintain relevance that they were losing. If that's not okay, then the answer is Peyton. Sean Payton has his own words too. Mm-hmm. He has a lot of scandals around him constantly.
Yeah.
He has a big fucking ego. He falls in love with players they should not fall in love with, and he wants to give them money he should not give them. What's his name? Hill in New Orleans.
Tyson Hill.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. He's like, this guy's Gale Sayers of quarterback. No, it's fucking trash. He can run 3 different
Don't
plays.
say that. Jaden loves that boy.
Does he really? Does he love him?
I don't know.
Oh, God.
He probably does, though, because Jay is weird like that. Jay likes the weirdest quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah. Shout out to Jaden. We're going to get him on here for the draft episode or episodes. Peyton
I actually tried to get him to join us one time. He says he's technically challenged.
I taught him how to work Discord. I can teach him how to do that.
hours. It'll take 12 hours, and I want to kill myself afterwards, but I'll get it done. I will also be heavily drunk that episode because I'm gonna need it. But Jaden is a brilliant football guy. He's got his idiosyncrasies. I love him. There's no disrespect to Jaden, even though he doesn't understand. Shout out to Jaden. That's my guy. Garrett Bowles for life, bitch. Anyway, Sean Payton comes with his own warrants, his scandal. He's got a lot of scandals. He's going to be expensive. It's going to cost you reportedly a first round pick. Yada yada yada.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem with Payton is that it's going to cost us, and we don't have a lot to really give. Yeah. Now, from what I understand, it's mainly just money. It's not like too much of anything else, but Harbaugh, at least, it's just going to be money. That's all we need.
And it's the Walmart. So what do you care? I think with Peyton,
what he offers is an offensive mind who's worked with a lot of quarterbacks. I think with him, it's going to come down to, and it's going to come down with any coach. How comfortable are you going to be with telling Russell Wilson to shut the fuck up and do what he's doing? Because Hackett Hackett made him play in his shitty system. So that sort of happened, kind of, sort of, maybe. But
let me ask you real quick on that, okay? So it's been a big debate on the board all year that Hackett had a scheme that was probably meant more for Rodgers than Russell, right?
Yeah.
But we also know that Russell has wanted to play as a pocket quarterback.
Yeah.
So clearly the last 2 games of the season, Roseberg actually went differently. He says he's using more rollouts. He's got Russ running around more, which obviously suits Russ well.
Yes.
One of my concerns, though, of course, is as Russ gets older, this is the same thing that I apply to a lot of the running quarterbacks, is that eventually you're going to have to learn how to play from the pocket. You're not going to be able to do that shit for very long.
Well, I think so with Russ.
With Russ, he's more of the scrambler thrower than the scrambler and then runner. And that plays well. That's what Mahomes is more of. That's what Josh Allen is.
But do you think that Russ, when he says that he wants to be a pocket passer, do you think he's going to...
yeah, he's going to do it now because he's humiliated.
But do you think he's going to clash with the next coach? Because, we're all sitting there saying, well, Hackett is a bad coach, which he was, but
yes,
he was probably only doing what Russ wanted him to do, which
I think that sometimes you can have a bad idea that's embraced by 2 people in agreement. I think Hackett was like, it's my scheme, it's my system, it's the way, it's what Jaded ironically rails about all the time. No, you coach to your players' talent, and your scheme should accentuate that. It's not about you, dummy. Not you, of course. And so Russ embraced that and probably liked Hackett and probably liked doing that idea because that's what he wanted to be. So I think that you had a bad idea that both people kind of embraced. And that's why, and I can't prove that. That's just conjecture. But God, the way that Russ acted and played, it sure kind of implied that. If you look at like what Peyton would do, he had this interesting interview with Coward when the Colin Coward asked him, "What would you do to fix him?" And he'd go, "Well, I'd look at give me his best." He said something like, "Give me his best plays in his career, like his 100 best plays." And what is the general thing that we're doing? There's the rollouts, is it X, Y, and Z? That's what we're gonna go back to. And I think that Russ knows that he's under the hot seat. Russ knows that he couldn't be cut this year, and at the end of this next upcoming season, it's going to suck to cut him, but you can afford to cut him, especially if you're just like, okay, we sucked. Let's go try to get a quarterback. Who cares if we're in cap hell? That only lasts 1 year most of the time, quite frankly. So he doesn't have a choice. It's actually a lot of similarities to Russell Westbrook from the NBA, where he showed up at his new team, acted an asshole, played idiotic, ruined the season basically by himself, became a petulant child. And now, the second year, what Westbrook is doing is he's saving his career, coming off the bench and doing what he's supposed to do and going to interviews, not being a bad teammate. And that's what Russ is going to have to do next year. Because if he leaves the Broncos not playing well, what's his career? Because he doesn't have it in him to pull a Joe Flacco and hold a clipboard
and make $25 million, dollars over 3 years sitting on the sidelines doing spot duty. So I think that he will be heavily incentivized to shut the fuck up and play a winning brand of football.
Yeah, and I think that is an advantage because Hackett was just the guy that wanted to be
Weak.
everybody's buddy. He's just too soft. Like he had to have discipline.
Yeah.
And so that's why Harbaugh makes sense on that level. Like he's just not going to put up with shit. It's like
That's why I like Shaw too, by the way,
yeah.
from Stanford.
All right, well, let's get ready to jump into our playoff scenarios, our picks, and I'm going to say right off the bat, I look at these first 6 games, and 5 of them could go either way, but I do have one you may find surprising that I picked an upset.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm wrong, but I just have a dumb feeling about it. But let's start with the Niners and the Seahawks. Who do you got?
I have the Niners. Geno Smith has not had a lot of success against them this year. The better roster, the better coaching, just top to bottom, goes to the Niners. The X factor is Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
If Jimmy G was healthy, it would feel almost academic. That's what makes it interesting. But I'll take the Niners by 10 points. Comfortable win.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, especially with the Niners being at home. In Seattle, there's always that kind of weird factor with the home field and whatnot. But in San Francisco, I don't think the Seahawks are really going to stand a chance. I do like Brock Purdy a little more than Garoppolo, just because one thing about Brock that we've learned is he's not afraid to run and move around the pocket, which is something Garoppolo doesn't do a lot of. I think Trey does, but of course, he got hurt and it didn't really matter in the end. But the one thing, I don't think anybody thought Brock would play as well as he has, so that's really kudos to him. But whether or not the pressure of the playoffs gets to him, we don't know. But the good news for Brock is he's got a good coach and he's got a good surrounding talent. I think they're going to keep him level-headed and support him. So I think the Niners are going to get it done. Jaguars hosting the Chargers.
I'm going to take the Jags. Peterson. So I am not a huge fan of the Chargers coach. I'm an analytics guy, and he does everything in his power to make me not want to be an analytics guy.
When it comes to defensive football, he knows what he's doing, and they have a good defense. And I think the world of Justin Herbert, but Doug Peterson's a better coach. The Jaguars have an explosive offense, especially with those receivers. They're going to be at home. The Chargers don't have a lot of playoff experience. Chargers have the better roster, but they also don't have a very good left tackle because the kid from Northwestern is out. I can't remember his name, but he's really, really good. It's going to be close. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair.
Really?
But that's I do, because on one side you have Zay Jones, and the other wide receiver who was killing me in fantasy, and I can't recall his name because I'm exhausted. And then on the other side you have Eckler, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen. So I think if there's going to be a lot of points, there might be some defensive touchdowns. I think it's going to be a wild game. It's going to be an action game, I think.
Yeah, I do pick the Jaguars. Earlier in the year, they smoked the Chargers in LA. I think this game, though, is going to be a little closer, and I think it's going to be a little bit more lower scoring. I think now they've had a taste of each other. They're kind of going to know their moves. But you nailed it on the head. This is coming down to coaching. I think Peterson is just worlds above the coach for the Chargers.
Staley,
yeah. So I think it's just going to be, Jaguars and go Trevor Lawrence. He's my boy. I've been pulling for him all year to get into the playoffs. So I'm glad they're there. I think they will get this game done. Whether or not they can do anything after this, I don't know. But this is a good start and a good way for Trevor to get some playoff experience. So I think the Jaguars get it done.
Yeah, both teams. I mean, it's a very winnable game for both teams.
Yeah, I think that as far as the players, they're going to come and compete. Like both of them are very good. Haber's a great quarterback. Lawrence is. Both have decent defenses. I think the Chargers have a little bit better of a running game. Both have some pretty good receivers, but it's really just going to come down to coaching and who can outmaneuver the other one.
If it's a blowout, shame. If it's a blowout and it's not because of like a bad call and injuries, like if it's a blowout, shame on whoever gets blown out. It should not be a blowout.
Right.
Shame on whoever.
All right. Bills hosting the Dolphins.
Bills by 35. It's the
Dolphins have their third string quarterback in. I don't have to give any more analysis than that. That's my analysis. Josh Allen versus a punching bag.
Yeah. It's funny because if Tua's playing this game, you nailed it earlier, I think is a whole different game. But yeah, there's just nothing after Tua's down. There's just nothing there. And maybe Allen has some still turnover problems. He's been kind of struggling, but I think overall they're just going to win by like 20 plus. I don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to hang with them, especially in Buffalo. Vikings hosting the Giants.
I'm taking the fucking Giants.
It's the one game that I chose, and I agree with you. We both like Kirk, but I'm like, I look at this game and I'm just like, this game scares the shit out of me because the Giants are one of those teams. They're sneaky and they play tough, and I just got a bad feeling they're going to go in there and they're going to shock the world and beat the Vikings.
They're favored. Like most people, it's the meme, Kirk Cousins isn't clutch, so you'll take the Giants. I want
to see the Vikings win, I do, but it's a bad matchup, I think. The one thing that works in the Vikings' favor is this year they have been in tough situations and come out on top. That's the good news for them.
This is my fear. Daniel Jones is going to do damage with his legs. And Saquon Barkley is going to get his yards because the Vikings defense is just not very good. There's just no way to put it. And their offensive line is not very good. So when the game starts and Justin Jefferson is getting doubled or has safety shaded towards him and all that crap, and then we remember that Adam Thielen used to be a really good player. Now he's just kind of old and past his prime. I look forward to logging onto the board and getting Kirk Cousins sucks to death.
You and I both. It's going to be a nightmare.
Awful. It's going to be
They're going to troll us unending if they
doesn't matter how bad there are. It doesn't matter. They're good. Here's Jay Cutler. Here's the worst comp ever.
Jay is going to be like, yeah, Daniel Jones better than Kirk Cousins.
I want to die.
All right. Bengals hosting the Ravens. Back-to-back weeks.
Bengals. It's the second best quarterback in football versus a guy who doesn't matter. Like Lamar could be there. MVP Lamar could be there, and the Bengals would still win.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reading an article earlier, and obviously they were talking about Lamar and how much of a difference maker he could be in the playoffs, and they were saying that Lamar had a chance if he comes back to like really go far in the playoffs because of his ability and everything. I'm like, but Lamar's had that chance the last few years and hasn't been able to do it. And that's not like just say it's all Lamar's fault, but again, this is a game that like if Lamar plays, it's gonna be a lot closer than people think.
It's gonna be
More watchable. If you're a Bengals fan or a Joe Burrow fan, this is gonna be a great fucking game.
Yeah, I think this is one of those situations where, like you were kind of talking about with Michigan and TCU, is that this is really the Bengals' game to lose. If they go in and they play like ass, they will get beat. If
Joe Burrow loses, it doesn't. If the Bengals lose this game, it doesn't matter how well Joe Burrow plays, unless he's like 38 for 40, 6 touchdowns, 500 yards, a rushing touchdown, and fucking saves a burning orphanage. It will change how people look at him. Because you cannot lose at home to a team with a third-string quarterback coming off of a week where they beat the fuck out of them. And they beat the fuck out of them because they're like, okay, who's your cornerback? Oh, it's Marlon Humphrey, and he's overrated. I'll throw to Jamar Chase. I'm just going to throw to Jamar Chase. I'm just going to throw
Is it definite that Lamar's not playing?
Yeah, I read that he said that his knee's unstable. He's not playing. And,
oh, wow.
I will say this to Baltimore. This is what happens when you don't go with the trend and offer the guy a contract in his third year when you know he's good. You're going to get Dak Prescotted, and then if you let him walk, you're going to go back to being a team with no quarterback and irrelevant. You got too big for your britches, and now you're going to – and by the way, go ahead and tag him. You're going to have a miserable year.
Well, it's kind of a conundrum because, like I said, I live in Baltimore, so I hear a lot of the feedback from the fans, and they don't like Greg Roman, and they don't really. When I was in the stands for the Bronco game, I kid you not, this wasn't any influence that I had. When Huntley was playing and came in, they were Ravens fans saying that they thought Huntley was better than Lamar. Now, here's the thing about this whole situation, in my opinion. Do I think Lamar is overrated? Yes. However, if I was the coach or the owner of this team, the Ravens, I'd be a fucking moron to let that kid walk because there's nothing better out there. Nothing right now. Nothing better.
Why do you think Kirk Cousins gets the money that he does?
Right.
It is what it is.
I don't think any Vikings fans really bitching that much. They may not like some of the results that happen, but figure the alternative. No, you don't want that.
The thing of it is that here's the thing with Lamar too, and this is the argument that he can make. I'm overrated. You don't need me. You're the Baltimore Ravens. You just run the ball and play good. You score 12 points a game without me.
Yeah.
Like just fucking it. Sometimes these guys, and they're smart. These front office guys, these owners, they're smart. But you can be too smart for your own good. Let's take a pessimistic view. Let's say Lamar, you have to give him 5 years, $300 million, all guaranteed. Okay, it's the worst case scenario. Let's say he's only good for 3 of those years. So you have a crappy year, right? In year 4, you're already going to suck because you didn't have a quarterback. Then you just release him and eat the cap hit. It doesn't matter. You're going to suck. You're going to go after a quarterback. Like, think about and think about that. And then look at the best case scenario. You're a Super Bowl contender. Just fucking pay him. They made this mess. And not only did they make this mess, they keep talking about, they keep leaking. Well, we offered him this contract. Well, Kyler Murray got more. Dak Prescott got more. All these guys who Lamar is arguably better than have better deals for more money, longer, and more guaranteed money. So the question is, how dumb do you think Lamar is? Well, he's his own agent, so he's negotiating against himself. Yeah, you know what? And he's also his own agent. So when he says, I'm not showing up for the franchise tag or I'll see you week 1 and see how it goes, he's probably not bluffing. Lamar, he's not a bluffer. They did this. They chose this.
Yeah.
And
I mean, look, I could see it from the Ravens' point of view, but, they're going to have to really sit down with Lamar and they're going to have to pay him fairly. You got these Deshaun Watsons out there and everything. He's got to be able to get money.
Yeah.
As a franchise quarterback. But I would tell Lamar, I was like, look, man, we're going to do our best to get more talent around you, but we've got to go after a quarterback. Maybe not the first round, but we've got to bring somebody else in because we need you to show us why we're paying you this money. But they have to organize their contract in a way that it's not going to rape them from getting any more talent for them.
Well, they just gave a middle linebacker $20 million.
Right. Which is a big thing. Big fuck you, Lamar. Eat that, motherfucker.
It's also a waste of it. Look, I think I don't know if I said this the last time I was on here, but Fred Warner, Roquan Smith, all these guys. This was 2005. We talk about them way more often than we do because they're amazing. But inside linebacker is devalued today. It sucks, but it is. And you gave him $20 million on a defense that it has aging pass rushers. So it's not even. I as a Steelers fan, I love everything they're doing in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Well, I think the Bengals will win. I think the only way they're going to lose this, especially now that if Lamar's not playing, I think they're probably going to move on. So the Monday night game, which I like the way they split this up. It's Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So Monday will be Tampa Bay hosting the Cowboys. And let me tell you, I was going back and forth on this game a lot. Who do you got?
Tampa. I didn't think about it very hard. This is what I know. Okay.
Neither team has a good coach. McCarthy's shot. He's a shot boxer. He used to be a good coach. I am old enough to remember when Mike McCarthy was a good coach.
Ben Roethlisberger was young.
Then you have Raheem Morris.
He's not a good coach. He's not bad. He's just very average. So I would take Raheem Morris over Mike McCarthy at this point, but you could debate it. So I'm throwing coaching out the window, okay? I have old man Brady, who's thrown the ball more than he ever wanted to. I have Dak Prescott, who is younger and he's pretty good. I think Dak's like falls between that 8 to 14 range, depending on the year. I think it's a pretty good quarterback. So I'm just going to call it a wash. You have Micah Parsons and a slightly better defense, right, versus Tampa, who has more veterans on it. And then you have Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb. It goes through all of that. This is what I know. The Cowboys are still an undisciplined team. They don't respond well to adversity. They're overrated all the time. They're on the road, and they're playing against Tom Brady. I have been saying the whole year, Tom Brady is not as good as he used to be, obviously. I didn't think he was completely washed. He's not playing right now like he's completely washed. Look, he threw for over 4,500 yards. It's the ugliest 4,500 yards I've ever seen throw in the fucking season. I get that. But I'm looking at two teams that I don't think highly of. One of them knows how to win, is a fairly consistent winner. The other one is the Dallas Cowboys. I'll just give me the Bucks. I don't know by how many points. They might win by 3. They might win by 17. Just Bucks.
Yeah. The Bucks, you have a quarterback who, as you said, isn't really – he's a shell of himself. But a couple times this year when they were pretty much out of the game, he showed why he's one of the best ever and came back to win those games.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm the Cowboys, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in and I am going to fucking force Pollard and Elliott down their throats all fucking game, keep Tom on the sidelines, try to play good defense as well as I can, and just control the clock. Yeah. Don't worry about getting fancy. Don't have to put up 500 yards passing. Just make them eat those running backs because their running backs are far better than the ones over on the other side.
Yeah.
But if you're going to come in, you're going to try to compete in the air with Tom Brady, you're going to lose. You just can't do it. And as you said, I don't have enough faith in Dallas, especially on the road, going down there and winning because they can't seem to put games away. Dallas has had leads that just keep blowing.
And they've almost beaten the Bucs a couple of times and
never seemed to do it. I think the other thing is that towards the end of the season, Tom Brady has been willing to hold on to the ball a little bit longer, even though he's going to get shellacked. So it's been a common take in the sports world that he's doing that, preserving himself for the playoffs. You don't have to be a fucking rocket scientist to see that. But the other side of the coin remains true as well. If he's going to get rid of the ball a lot, unless he absolutely has to hold on to it or it's a sweet play, Micah Parsons doesn't matter as much. Dexter Lawrence doesn't matter as much. And maybe that's the wrong Lawrence, but Marcus Lawrence maybe. The strength of the Cowboys defense is the pass rush. And the Cowboys, here's the thing. The Cowboys should win this game.
Mm-hmm. They are
the better
record. They've played better for most of the year, but
I can't pick them.
Yeah,
I can't pick them.
Yeah, it's strange to say that. Oh my God.
It's irresponsible gambling to bet on the Cowboys in the postseason.
Yep. All right, man. Well, I think that's it for us. We did a pretty good job this week.
Yeah, we went through a lot of content. Oh, do you want to real quick give the your Super Bowl prediction, or do you want to save that for after the first week?
Yeah, let's do this. I was just thinking about this as we were talking, because we'll probably get together again in maybe a couple weeks, but maybe next week, since we've got the playoffs running, you and I will just get together for like a quick 5 or 10 minutes, give our playoff picks for that week, and we'll just put up as a quick video.
Okay, we can do
and
that.
then we'll come back maybe the next week after that and do another full show.
Yeah. That works as a little teaser.
This way we could just kind of keep our picks going and like who we think is going to win, because things change within a week. You never know.
Yeah, injuries happen.
Yeah.
Crap like that too. Yeah. Well, it was a hell of a show. I appreciate. We went through a lot of content,
and we spent a decent amount of time on ECU.
And then once football's over, we're going to jump into basketball. And maybe some hockey. I haven't really followed too much. I've noticed my Blazers have been like tanking, so that's not good. But
They'll
anyway,
get back.
Well, thank you for joining me, sir. And
thank you for having me.
Hang tight real quick, and we're just going to do our little outro. And then thank everybody for watching us. Subscribe to the channel. Give us some likes. And also, if you got any comments about some of the commentary we've had, let us know. Maybe your own picks of what you got coming up for games. If not, we'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your week.
DPOY.